Hello, everyone. Peace be upon you, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone for this amazing interpretation and translation conference held in our dear brotherly country, Republic of Yemen. Thank you so much for the President of University, for the Dean of College, for the organizing committee, the scientific committee, the President, and all members. Thank you so much for all researchers, and thank you so much for Dr. Ibrahim Jibril and Dr. Ahmed Mounis for giving me his role and his turn to deliver my paper. I'm sorry for that because I have a lot of things to do. I'm still on campus. I'm sitting in the council office now and delivering my paper for you. And I hope that this paper will be up to your expectations. May I share the presentation with you?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Well, our today's paper is titled Interpreters in Conflict Zone, a survey-based study. This paper is based on many important factors: interpreters, viewpoints, interviews, feedbacks. So we are going to cut the chest and start with the introduction. So the first and foremost topic, we have to say that Arab countries in general witnessed and still witnessing problems since forever. This is why interpreters and translators all over the world, especially in these countries, and translation teachers must be able to find way out for these challenges. The current study is a survey-based study, analysis of interviews held by the researcher with some interpreters who worked in conflict zones from different parts of the world, especially in Asia and Arab countries. We must talk about the interpretation types as well. And types of interpreting, in general, we have two types of interpreting. We have consecutive interpreting and we have simultaneous interpreting. Consecutive interpreting is based on listening, taking notes, producing something in the target language. This is not the case with simultaneous interpreting because it's much more difficult comparing it to the consecutive mode. Why? Because it's simultaneous, as the name suggests. It's listening,
I'm sorry, Dr.
analyzing.
Ibrahim, if you make it just in the full screen mode, it would be much better. Full screen mode.
Excuse me?
Full screen
mode, yes. Okay. Consider done, sir. Consider done. I'm just going to slideshow presentation. Okay. Is it better now?
It's much better, yeah. That's good.
Thank you so much for this remark. Okay. In fact, as we said that simultaneous interpreting is uniquely different and difficult in comparison with the consecutive mode. Why? Because simultaneous interpreting is listening, analyzing, and producing a speech in the TL at the same time. So making mistakes in simultaneous interpreting is inevitable. No one is perfect in simultaneous interpreting. And even if you are perfect, you might face some sort of glitches from time to time. What we have to handle it. This is my own piece of advice. So how many types of simultaneous interpreting do we have? We have 5 types. We have conference interpreting, which is defined as the prime type. And there are many, let's say, departments and colleges all over the world giving their students BA or MA in conference interpreting, and there is in Europe something called Conference Interpreting Association as well. We also have virtual interpreting. We have whisper interpreting. We also have online interpreting, television interpreting. So all these types of interpretations must be taken into account once we are teaching our students, especially I'm a simultaneous and consecutive interpreting faculty member at College of Arts, teaching them, we have to teach them all different types of these modes that I have just mentioned. So now we are going to dig in depth more and more in the methodology of the study that we have carried out. The researcher will hold interviews with 4 available professional interpreters selected on the basis of availability and diversity in different areas of Asian continent. The interviews are transformed into written statements. After that, he'll analyze their viewpoints qualitatively and quantitatively to know more challenges that conflict zone interpreters could face during the interpreting process and means of overcoming such challenges. So, as I said, interviewing them, I interviewed 4 interpreters. I transformed their words and statements. I analyzed their statements. I found and pinpointed the challenges they faced during interpretation and the solutions they presented during their experience on the ground. So, data collection, as I said, we have 4 interpreters from Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, Kazakhstan. As I told you, we have chosen them on the basis of diversity and availability. I sent a request to 7 to 8 interpreters. All of them said okay. 4 of them accepted my own interview, and they were ready to be interviewed because the other 4 were busy. Excuse me, anything? Is there anything? Is there anything? Sorry.
Dr. Ibrahim, go on, no problem.
Okay, thanks so much. So these are the data of the interpreters, their gender, their academic degrees, their country, and their job title. I think it's clear on the screen now. You can see them all. And now we are going to be as short as possible in analyzing their own, let's say, experience. So my first point is all participants demonstrated their viewpoints regarding interpreters in conflict zone. They highlighted the nature of the task shouldered on them, the challenges they faced, and the possible solutions. The first participant in the survey-based study says that an interpreter task in conflict zone is fraught with risks due to the nature of circumstances in the area in question. He also mentioned some difficulties that interpreter could encounter. For example, linguistic factors when he's gonna interpret for someone who is not educated, for example. He can't interpret for him in the, let's say, modern Arabic standard. He has to make use of the colloquial dialects so as to make it possible for him. And there are many other issues, extra linguistic factors associated with the process, not to mention the insecurity and threats. And of course, once we are interpreting on the ground, especially in conflict zone, the situation is not secure. This is why the level of insecurity impacts the production of interpretation. It will be, let's say, not perfect enough. Why? Because the interpreter is thinking about his own security, how to protect himself, and instead of producing something. So the level of focus, it's not going to be 100% on out of 100% on the product, but on his security situation as well. And he also highlighted, let's say, the linguistic factors are also significant because the intended, let's say, protocol given to him by the security detail responsible for, the linguistic factors, are also significant because the intended receivers of the interpreting services are mostly locals that conflict zone witness. They are not always well versed in language and education. This means that the interpreter can resort to additional strategy in interpreting and explain the source language speaker's goals. So, as we said, that interpretation is a 3-in-1 process. Once we are gonna add certain words to our speech, it will, let's say, increase the mounting pressure on our brain, and this will produce even impactful result on the product in general. That was the feedback of the first interpreter. The second interpreter cites that the major challenges that interpreters of conflict zone are neutrally, and following ethical professional factors. So the second interpreter focused on the ethical nature of the, let's say, product that the interpreter deal with during the process of interpreting, because the majority of such interpreters are from the very conflict zone. I mean, the ones who are interpreting for the conflict zone, let's say, receivers are locals. So she highlights that the most important message we should convey is to render the speeches of all parties clearly to everyone and never be biased to any party involved. Interpreters must be part of solution, not problems. So the second viewpoint of the interpreter is regarded as neutrality is the answer for any problem. Sometimes when the interpreters are hired, they are hired by the upper hand. They are hired by the authorities, and the ones who are, let's say, migrants or refugee camp personnel are the weak, let's say, part of the equation. Once those, let's say, interpreters are assigned, they might be dictated by certain protocol or certain rules to be followed. Here, the interpreter says that we have to be neutral as much as we can so as to be on the safe side and avoid any sort of collateral damage. That was her own feedback. While the third interpreter mentioned that the work of interpreters in conflict zone is more challenging because it's always accompanied by harsh conditions and psychological pressures. The major challenge is to how access important information for people living in the areas where infrastructure is damaged and there is no electricity. After all, the other challenge is the restriction imposed on the freedom of press that reflects negatively on the interpreter, not to mention the emotional and psychological challenges regarding war scenes as well. Also, the interpreter could face hostilities and threats that impact his personal safety. Speaking of the linguistic challenges, she says that the diversity of dialects constitutes a big challenge for interpreters in conflict zones. And those interpreters must be aware of such dialects to produce a suitable TL product. Finally, the participant presents some solutions for those who want to be in conflict zone interpreters. They have to be armed with physical and mental health, high flexibility, and be able to adapt to changing circumstances. On the other hand, he must improve his skills and experiences as well as learn how to request assistance from authorities in order to perform his duties effectively. So, she highlighted the nature of the work, the linguistic, the psychological pressure, the threats. So, if I'm going to be an interpreter working for the government, for example, in conflict zones, for example, in, let's say, in any troubled region in Middle East, I have to ask the authorities or the one who hires me to provide me with personal security so as to move from one area to another safely without being attacked by any authorities. This is number one. Number two, which is important, that I have to be highly flexible to be on the safe side. This is my topic in this regard. When we talk about the fourth participant from Kazakhstan, and she is a conference interpreting, and she has a badge of conference interpreting from the Conference Interpreting Association, the interpreter's job in critical situations, as in countries like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Gaza. She mentioned these countries, by the way, witnessing killings, bombing, the spread of violence and insecurity. It means that the interpreters are under heavy pressure due to the nature of circumstances in the region, and their work is fraught with risk. Then their product and the TL will be critical if they don't gain the status of official aid workers working for international organization, because such status will mitigate the tension and conflict they face. Their TL product will be better. Finding solutions for such challenges requires specialists to conduct a lot of studies to learn about such challenges and means of overcoming them. That was her feedback. So she mentioned something important, that if I want to be an interpreter working in conflict zone, I have to get official status of, let's say, international aid workers, so as to be having what's called authority on the ground, so as to be formidable, so as to avoid any sort of prosecution on the ground. This is why I'll be safe enough when I get this status. And then she said, we have to work hard for the sake of carrying out many more studies in this regard, so as to get many feedbacks from many interpreters and many, let's say, researchers, and find out good means of solutions.
I have to say that your 15 minutes is over. So you can conclude in 1 or 2 minutes.
I wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. I'm sorry for, thank you so much. So the conclusions, as I said, we have challenges, we have solutions. The most important challenge is the insecurity. The most important solution for this, getting the, let's say, permission from authorities to work safely in this regard. The most second most difficult situation is the level of education of the receivers of the product. The solution for this problem is to be armed with different types of dialects, to be learning many things about this point. And we also have other important topics concerning the challenges, extra linguistic features, let's say the bombs, gunshots, psychological things, and